Today we're going to talk about the city-states of ancient Sumer. So this is where civilization is actually going to start. This is going to take place in what's called Mesopotamia, which is in present-day Iraq. And we're going to look at some of the developments. There's going to be some really major developments of humans during this time period. So here we go. Okay, so Mesopotamia is at the eastern end of what's called the Fertile Crescent. This is an arc of land from the Mediterranean Sea all the way to the Persian Gulf that is really good for farmland because there's a lot of rivers that go through there. So the two big rivers is the Tigris and the Euphrates. Okay, so what we're looking at here, this map, we're looking at there's Egypt, present day Egypt right here. Saudi Arabia is right in this area. This right here is Iraq. Okay, so this is where we're talking about right here. So this green area is the Fertile Crescent. Okay, so see how it kind of makes a crescent. So the Tigris and the Euphrates are going to be the important part of what's going to make up Mesopotamia. And the reason for that is because the rivers, what they'll do is they'll overflow, and then when they recede back down, the soil they leave is very rich. It's called silt. Okay, and this is a really good place to farm crops. Okay, so Mesopotamian civilization was one of history's most important early civilizations. So developing consistent agriculture required controlling the water supply. Okay, so what they're going to do is they're going to dig a system of drainage ditches and irrigation works, canals, and things of that nature. And so what's going to happen is this is going to lead to a much larger food supply. And so where they're in history, all throughout history, this is a general rule. Whenever there's a lot of food, there's going to be a lot of people. And the reason for that is people aren't starving to death. Okay, and so they're living longer. And so we're going to see significant population growth and the emergence of civilization. So people are going to start to develop villages and towns. And the Sumerians developed the first Mesopotamian civilization. This is usually regarded as the first civilization. Okay. So around 3000 BC, the Sumerians had formed a number of city-states. So, for example, Ur and Uruk. So these city-states, what a city-state is it's a city and its surrounding areas. Okay, and then those would be an independent state. So if we're talking about like present day, to put this in terms that we're kind of familiar with, if St. Louis was the city, then that would mean all the suburbs of St. Louis would be part of the city state, and it would be like an independent state. Okay, so independent of maybe Chicago with its suburbs. Okay, so in these city states, they built largely with mud bricks. Very, very important inventions are going to come out of Mesopotamia. So one is the arch and the dome, okay, and some of the largest brick buildings in the world. Okay, so these are major architectural advancements. The most important building in any Mesopotamian city is going to be the temple. Okay, and it was built on top of a massive step tower called a ziggurat. Okay, and it was always on the top because that was closest to the gods. Okay, so they believed that the gods and the goddesses owned and ruled the cities. Okay, so the Sumerian state was a theocracy. So this is a government that is ruled by divine authority. So that means is your very upper class are going to be your priests and priestesses. They're the most important people in the civilization. So they're going to rule politically as well as religiously. And so eventually ruling power will be passed more into the hands of kings. So kings will eventually trace their authority back to the divine. So for example, when we talk about Egypt, they're going to basically say that they are gods. Okay, but these kings rule by what's called divine right, and it's the idea that they were put in that family knowing that they would be king someday, and so God or the gods put them there knowing they would one day rule, and so they only have to answer to the gods. Okay. Now, as far as their economy was mostly agricultural. They did have some industries because there were more advances in farming. So not everybody had to be a farmer. So in industry like metalwork and woolen textiles, they were able to trade these, and they were able to ship goods with the invention of the wheel. Okay, so this picture here shows one of the earliest wheels, what that would have looked like around. It was invented around 3000 BC. Okay, so they would put goods on carts, and they would take those carts to other towns, and then they would trade goods. Okay, so this is the wheel evolution. So it goes all the way up to 2013, which looks much more modern. Oh, this is more like what I have on my cars in 1946. But you can see the evolution of the wheel there. Okay, so a Sumerian city-state had three classes in it. You had your nobles, your commoners, and your slaves. So the nobles would be the royal family, any royal officials, priests, their families. So when we're talking the nobles on this pyramid here, we're talking these first two. These would be the nobles. Okay, your commoners are going to be your farmers, your merchants, your fishers, and your craftspeople. And then these of the commoners, 90% of the people were farmers. And then on the very bottom, you have your slaves. Okay, so these were the people who worked on large building projects. They wove cloth, they worked in farms of the nobles. Oftentimes, your slaves would be people who are in debt and are working off debt at this time. Okay, all right. Empires in ancient Mesopotamia. So the Akkadians lived north of Sumer. Okay, so you can see here's the map. So once again, this is right here. This is Saudi Arabia. There's Iraq. It goes like right around here. This is where we're at. Okay, so Sumer. This is the Persian Gulf. Sumer sits just north of the Persian Gulf, and then the Akkadians lived just north of that. Okay, and they spoke a Semitic language. In 2340 BC, Sargon, who was a leader, conquered the Sumerian city-states and set up the world's first empire. Okay, so the Akkadians are going to start to take over some of these Sumerian city-states here. And then, so an empire is a large political unit that controls many peoples and territories. And in 1792 BC, Hammurabi of Babylon, so Babylon is just south of Akkad and Sumer, he is going to take over, establish a new empire over much of this. Okay, south of Akkad is Babylon. Okay, so he is going to control this area right in here. Okay. Okay. So this right here shows the Babylonian Empire. So you can see once again there's a Persian Gulf. It's a little more zoomed in, so it looks bigger, but it goes all the way right here. So there's Babylon. This is where the Sumerian states are. This is where the Akkadian Empire was, and so now Babylonia encompasses all of this. Okay. So Hammurabi, probably his most important contribution to the world is what's called Hammurabi's Code, and it's an early system of law. And basically, it calls for very harsh punishments against criminals, and it believed in retaliation. So an eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. That was the saying, and that was the fundamental saying in Hammurabi's Code. And what's important about this is the pillar that his code is written on. It was all written down. So people could tell if I committed a crime, let's say I stole an apple, then I could go on here and I could figure out what the penalty for thievery is. Okay? And so punishments varied according to social status. So if I'm a noble, I'm not going to get as much of a punishment as if I'm a commoner. Okay, they don't have what's called common law back then. They didn't have that. We have it here. It doesn't matter if you're rich or poor, whatever. The law applies to you no matter who you are. but it also punished public officials who failed in their duties or who were corrupt. So if there's a politician who's using his position to further his own agenda to make himself rich or whatever, he can be punished for that as well. Okay. It also includes consumer protection, so it would hold builders responsible for the quality of the work. So, for example, if a building collapsed and someone was killed, then whoever built that could be executed. And then also, damages would have to be paid to the people injured. Um, the largest group of laws covered marriage and the family. And so most marriages were arranged, so the parents would arrange marriages, and then the bride and groom would sign a marriage contract in order to be officially married. And then the code was very, very patriarchal. Okay, it very much enforced women's and children's obedience to the male head of the family. Okay, so women had fewer rights and privileges than men. And like I said, it enforced obedience of children to parents. So, for example, a father could cut off the hand of a son who had hit him. Okay, so that was all legal, which is crazy, by the way. The importance of religion. So, due to the harsh environment and famines, Mesopotamians believed that the world was controlled by often destructive supernatural forces and deities. So, basically, they just kind of felt like they were just at the will of the gods. Okay, so they were obviously polytheistic, so that means that they believed in many gods and goddesses, and they believed that humans were there to serve and to obey the gods, and that they were created to do the manual labor that the gods were not willing to do. And so humans, being inferior beings, could never be sure what the deities might do to help or hurt them. And so maybe one day you go out and you farm and you do a really good job and you feel like, yay, I made the gods happy. But the next day you go out and farmed and, oh no, there's a big flood coming and all my crops are gone. Well, I must have done something to make the gods upset with me. Okay, so that's kind of how the people live their lives. So the creativity of the Sumerians. So Sumerians were important inventors, and they created a system of writing called cuneiform. Cuneiform means wedge shaped, and what they would do is they would take a reed stylus. So this is right here, a reed stylus, and then they would cut it so it made kind of a wedge, and then they would mark on clay tablets like this, or like this is an actual tablet that they did this on, and then they would bake it in the sun, and so then it was permanent and you could read it. So writing was used for a lot of different reasons, but mostly for record keeping. Okay, that was the big thing. They were very good record keepers, but also teaching and then the law. And so, as a result of writing, a new invention of writing, a new class of scribes are writers and copyists, will arise. And so, being a scribe was key to a successful career for an upper class Mesopotamian boy because it's very important when you are looking to succeed that it's important for you to know how to read and write. So being a scribe gives you a lot of experience in that area. And writing also is going to pass on cultural knowledge from generation to generation. Okay, so that's very important as well. So this right here is some examples of cuneiform writing and what it might look like. It looks very strange to me, just triangles and lines to me. But they all have meanings, and just like our letters do. So, okay. So the Epic of Gilgamesh. So the Epic of Gilgamesh is an epic poem from the Sumerians, and it teaches the lesson that only the gods are immortal. So in this story, Gilgamesh is wise and strong, and he's part human and part god. And he befriends a hairy beast named Enkidu. And Enkidu dies, and so Gilgamesh feels the pain of death. And so he searches for the secret of immortality, but he fails. Okay? So basically, like I said, the moral of the story is only gods are immortal. Humans, doesn't matter what you are, animals, they are not immortal. So you will feel the sting of death. Important technologies were invented during the Sumerians, or by the Sumerians, was like, for example, the wagon wheel. Mathematics, they invented mathematics, so they invented a number system based on 60. So this is why when we tell time, we have 60 minutes in an hour, 60 seconds in a minute. So that is based off of the Sumerian um, mathematic number system. And then they made advances in applying geometry to engineering, and which is why they were able to create things like the arch and the dome and that. As far as astronomy goes, they charted constellations using their number system, and did a lot of charting of the stars. Okay, that's it for today. I hope you guys all have a good day. Don't forget to do your processor. Have a good day.